This is a guest tips episode of Guitar Tips, and my guest today is my friend Rich Hinman. Uh, we've played music together for a lot of years, and when I first met Rich, he was a guitar player, playing the six-string guitar as you do. And over the years, he's taken on um, other things, most notably the pedal steel guitar. But I know at times he's practiced piano and drums and mandolin and chromatic harmonica and Weissenborn and a lot of different things. So I was curious to talk to Rich because one question I get from a lot of students is, hey, I'm interested in this other instrument. Is it okay to do a deep dive on another instrument? And what will that mean for my guitar playing? And I always think of Rich when people ask me that question. So I thought rather than just referencing Rich, I would actually have a conversation with him. So, hi, Rich.
Hey, Adam.
So I'm wondering if we could start there, like, because it seems like the pedal steel is the thing that's taken on the most, kind of central instrument in your musical life, and I'm wondering how it was for you when you were at that kind of fork in the road.
Well, I tell people this a lot, and I don't mean this in a discouraging way. I just mean it in a kind of like, sorry, I'm expanding the screen a little bit. I just mean it in like a, I don't know. I just mean it to be realistic, which is that when I started, I had a lot of time on my hands. Okay. I was living in New York. My rent was like split with my girlfriend. My part was $550 a month. I taught a few days a week. And that's basically what I did. And I played some gigs here and there, but I wasn't super busy. Okay. So pedal steel, like some other things, it's sort of, I think it comes down to like, it depends on how you want to use something, right? Like yeah. If you want to get, I think there's a difference. You can be the kind of person who can play something at home. If you're doing home recording, for example, you're producing stuff, you're writing, you're making tracks, you can figure out how to like get something out of the pedal steel, for example, like pretty quickly, like it quicker than you think, like it, but getting to a place where you can really play it takes a really long time. I think with a lot of these instruments, if you're gonna really do it, you have to kind of just dive into it and like really kind of just be like, this is what I'm doing right now. And like give yourself some time of doing that and trust that like you already play the guitar, like you play the guitar, like you can keep it up and like you can get better at it. And like, there's lots of ways to work at it, but like really, I think if you, I think like you already play it. Like think about like you just have to get the physicality of a new instrument into your body before you can really like actually use it. And then you can start to decide like, what do I want to do with this? But you're going to need to spend time and just kind of sit there with it and explore and mess up and not really know how to do certain things and have to look at it. That's basically how that stuff works. You kind of follow the thread. If you don't have a lot of time, you might want to just not worry about doing anything else and just like don't worry about like I'm also going to practice guitar. also going to practice this. Like, forget it. Don't worry about it. Like, really bad.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, I think that's the thing that so at least some of the students that I've talked with about it, they're just afraid of that because they've never not practiced the guitar, and so they're afraid of it. What how did you know when you were ready to take it out of the house and play it on a gig or at a session or something?
I don't know that I ever did. The thing that the pedal steel unlocks in particular is that once you play it, there's just so few people that play it and enough people that actually want it that people will just start asking you, and you'll be like, okay. And if you can just like, if you can kind of get away with it, like it took, I probably played the first gig I played in probably took 6 months.
Wow, that's amazing.
It probably wasn't good. I'm sure it was bad, but it's like there are ways that you can keep it very simple, and kind of work within like the narrow parameters of what you know, and just try to play in tune and try to sort of like make music out of it. That I think you can kind of do it. It depends, and it also depends on the context, right? Like if someone's like, I think it's also okay, by the way, like this is a sort of thing, something that's talked about in music education some, and I think it's okay to just say like, I'm not actually, like if someone asks you to do a gig and you feel like I really can't do this gig, like I'm just not capable of doing this, just say you can't do it. It's okay. Like a lot of there's a kind of like thing, it's like just say you can do it and just figure it out. Like I think sometimes that's true, but sometimes like there are gigs that in the beginning you won't be able to do, or recording sessions that you'll be like, oh, I'm not ready for this, and then like that's okay. You can sort of like make those judgment calls as you go. But yeah, a pedal steel just takes a while, a lot of hours in the beginning just to get to this place where you're like, all right, I can do this. I can like get on stage and plug it in and know what I'm doing, and just like and be able to like deal,
Wow. And then you also have to figure out just some of the like logistics of taking it onto a stage. Like I remember a few years ago when you were practicing mandolin, and then you came to a gig and you had the mandolin on the gig, and there's a difference between like knowing where the notes are and then like how do I make mandolin work in a club. And I suppose it's also true with the pedal steel. You don't just plug into your favorite guitar amp and like, okay, cool, there it is. Like how do you figure that stuff out?
I think some of it is asking people. So I think a good thing about the internet era is that it's very easy to ask people things. It's very easy to like people ask me questions about pedal steel on Instagram all the time, and unless I forget or space out, I usually answer them. Like, because it's good. Usually I don't have to write that much, and it's not that big a deal, and it's like other people have had the experience. So one thing you can do is ask people. Another thing you can do is try to like agree to do a gig when you feel like, okay, the stakes are relatively low. I think I can handle this. Like, and then just do your best. And like, you may go and be like, oh, this amp does not work. I mean, I've had that experience. Like pedal steel, for example, is like the instrument is very hot. Like, unlike a guitar, like a really small amp on pedal steel, like unless you're going for something very specific, like, and very kind of like grungy, will usually sound bad. Like it won't sound like the way you want a pedal steel guitar to sound. And I learned in the first few years I was playing, I was like, oh, these amps I have for guitar some of these don't really work on this deal, because I'll bring him to the gig and it'll just be like distorting right away, you know? So that's something I just learned by like kind of by doing it. And the same thing, I know a lot of people who play acoustic instruments, and I think that's something where you want to talk to people who do it, to figure out what they use, and then you'll go, and then you might find out like, oh man, I want to play mandolin on this, but every time I try to play it in this context, it feeds back. Why? What is that situation? Or I can't hear it. Like, what is that? And then again, you can come back and you can like change what you're doing, maybe get a different piece of gear, talk to some other people and be like, all right, man, like find someone that it's always good to have someone that you think of as a kind of like model for the thing that you're trying to do, and to like, and we're in a very fortunate place where we can actually, for the most part, get in touch with those people. But think of someone in your community, or like someone in your extended community who plays that instrument, and then ask them. And you can get a lot of information. Like usually it doesn't. Sometimes like taking a lesson is a really good thing, but sometimes it doesn't even require a lesson. Sometimes just reach out and ask. If you just have one question, you can sometimes just reach out and ask one question. But I think the gear thing and the like amplification thing ends up being, there's a combination of getting information from other people. Don't look on like the Telecaster forum or whatever, you know, like don't get random opinions, because they might be bad and wrong. Like talk to people that you trust, that you think are good. And if you don't know anyone, someone you know knows someone. So that's like something you can do to kind of figure it out. And I do think taking lessons is really good, because you can, even just one or two lessons, you can not only learn about playing the instrument, you can ask all of those questions, you know, and someone can sit with you and guide you through it a little bit. Because when I started playing steel, I had no idea about, there's all this stuff that you just have there's so much mechanical stuff, and there's so much that the way you tune the instrument is really different from the way you tune a guitar. Like there's all these things that I don't know if I would have known about. And like someone just sitting and being like, this is what's up, this is what you do. Even if you change that stuff, even if you ultimately are like, actually, I kind of disagree with the way they told me that, it gives you some kind of basis. It gives you somewhere to start from.
Right. That's cool. And I know this about you, that you're somebody who still takes lessons, you know, probably more than any professional, or as much or more than any professional musician I know. You're always mentioning to me like, oh yeah, I just had a lesson, not necessarily pedal steel lessons, but just lessons with people, with musicians.
Yeah, all the time. I think it's really, I don't know about all the time, but often enough. And I think it's really, I don't know, I think it's just really like, and it's funny because in the past, it's been a very long time since I've taken a lesson where it was like, okay, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go home and you're going to work on this, and you're going to do this for 50% of the time and this for 25% of the time. They're always very like kind of open and conceptual. Like the truth about all this stuff is that you're always teaching yourself, right? Like you're always basically like essentially your own teacher. You're like, okay, you're looking at yourself as honestly as you can and being like, okay, what am I actually interested in? What do I feel like I need? What's like sort of weak what I do? And also like I'm always looking for things that I can I just taught someone a pedal steel lesson, and we really talked about, and he was doing a really good job like mapping stuff out on the instrument. And I sort of like just encouraged him to continue to like, while he was doing that, to just explore. You know, I think that's the thing that's really like, you want to leave time open when you're playing a new instrument, but really any instrument. But a new instrument is great for this because because you don't know as much. So it's fun to sit and just be like, all right, what does this do? What does this do? Okay, that's weird. All right, so I figured out, I've mapped out like G in this area. Like, how do I make music in G? You know, stuff like that. I think finding some kind of like, you're getting things from other people, but you're always to some extent teaching yourself. and finding some kind of balance between like rigidly being like, all right, I'm gonna learn all these scales or whatever, and being like, all right, let me just like have fun and see, like try to, because you're gonna, especially when an instrument is new, you're gonna stumble on a lot of new things because it's new. Like you don't know as much, so you'll be like, oh, I can do that. I didn't know that. Like it's great. It's like so fun, you know, and it keeps music fresh, I think.
Beautiful. I had one other question I wanted to ask you. You got a minute or two to answer one more question?
Yeah.
I know just from some driving around in the car with you at different times, like you've made playlists of stuff. I forget who the player was, but you had like a whole Spotify playlist of, was it Lloyd Maines or you had like,
I have a giant, for those who are interested, who are watching this, you can probably find it through me on Spotify, or you may just be able to search Lloyd Green on Spotify. It is a huge playlist. It's like 4 hours long. And it's like, it's really wild. And it's a lot of like stuff that aren't records that people, I mean, I got it through a bunch of lists and different things. And then kind of, it took me a long time. I have done that a few times, and that's also really enjoyable. I often, like when I go to like when I try to do something new, I often like get there because of one specific thing. I've been trying just in the last little bit to play chromatic harmonica, which is so hard, and it's really fun. I'm really enjoying it because right now, obviously, I have a lot of time, and I can kind of like allow myself to, again, sit inside and explore and try to figure out how to just get a decent sound out of it. But really, I just got into it because of Toots Thielman's. Like if he had never lived, there's no chance I would ever be doing this. And I'll probably end up making like a Toots playlist at some point. But often there's one person that's kind of a bridge for me into something. So I often make playlists of stuff that inspires me, and like I'll drive around and listen to the playlist because it, you know, like you start to, here's another cool thing. Like when you're starting to play an instrument, I'm nowhere near this place on chromatic harmonica, but this definitely happened to me like with steel. You start to hear things and you actually start to know what they're doing. Like maybe not all the way, but if you start to hear things on steel, you're like, oh, that's what that is. I know what that is because I do that. You know, like even if I can't do it the way that they can, like I can physically, and you start to absorb the information differently because you have like a root, you have a little bit of knowledge in there, and you can start to kind of take in the information differently. And I think it's actually a good argument for why it's a good idea to try to check out other instruments. Because then you start hearing music differently. You start hearing the way people are playing differently. Like if you spend time playing bass, for example, and you start like trying to figure out what do people do, and then really listening to records, like you'll hear bass differently. It won't sound the same to you because you're coming from this new place, and it like opens up. It opens up a bit of it opens up a bit of a world to you. So I think it's like a cool thing to explore. I would say don't take on too many things at once. Just be like, I'm really excited about this. I really want to do it. Spend some time, sacrifice a little bit of your guitar playing because you might just have to for the time being. And then I think ultimately those things end up feeding each other, and it will make you a better musician. And then if you're a better musician, you kind of are automatically a better guitar player. Like it's kind of like, if you think of it that way, like music is more important than like any specific instrument, you know? So just like go check something else out for a while, and it might help if you're excited and if you have the time, and try to give it enough time.
Wow. That's awesome. Rich, this has been great. I feel like I just learned a whole lot. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And I'll be glad to share this with Guitar Tips Pro, and I'm sure a lot of light bulbs will be popping.
I hope so. Yeah, and people can ask me questions about stuff. I'm around. I'm easy to find. I'm easy to find on Instagram, and you can usually Instagram message me, and I might not get it for a day or so if I don't already follow you, but I'll find it.
Okay.
And yeah, you're welcome to. People are welcome to ask me.
Great. Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon, Adam.
Okay. Bye, Rich.
Bye.